But what I want to actually touch upon is something that I mentioned earlier as well, how Multicoin really backs its projects, right? IONET was like one of your biggest bets. And right before the token launch, there was all this Martin Shkreli shit going around, right? What was ground zero in Multicoin's office and in your group chats? What was going on? And just break down that entire.
So the story there was we had invested we were the first money into that business. I'd actually met the founder at Hacker House in Austin, and we put $2 million into that business. We are, fairly large holders of the asset, and we sort of worked with them and the team over the course of the last year in order to, as they built out the product and scaled the business. And we realized, going into the launch, which was I believe in June. This is a thing that happens in every aspect of crypto. There are always vocal people who are shutting it down. In this case, the person who was leading most of the accusations was a guy who had a ton of distribution, which was unique for me because I've obviously seen a bunch of people say things about a bunch of my other portfolio companies, but it was a really interesting time because one, some of the criticism was very valid, which is to say, the points program that they had been running was inviting instances and people who were spoofing and farming the network. Right. This is always a hard problem for any. I can tell you horror stories about Helium. I can tell you horror stories about Render, about a ton of permissionless networks. When you're adding resources to them, it's a very non-trivial civil resistance problem. It's a civil resistance problem across all of crypto, but specifically to DeepEns, it's a harder problem to solve because with virtual resources, it's so easy to kind of spoof resources. And so I think he drew attention to some really important problems, but it also sort of highlighted, in the response, certain problems in the way that management was handling it. And so, ultimately, I think it's a decision that the team made, which was at this stage there is certain changes that need to be made in order to make sure that we are able to succeed in this next stage of growth. And look, it was me and a handful of the other investors, and you sort of guess who they are. I won't sort of take them by name, but we're in pretty close communication with the team across all of this. A moment of crisis is always it's an opportunity to reflect to the world that you have the substance and you have that you're a good actor. It's not something to waste. And so we sort of helped them craft sort of whatever they needed in terms of a strategy and a messaging strategy and a broader PR strategy, in order to make sure they weren't letting this sort of happen unfettered, right? And so that whole scenario ended up one, creating new product to make sure that the network was more stable and more grounded, but two, also created certain operational changes within the company such that they were able to succeed going forward. And I think they've done a very strong job since then of continuing to build out the team, continuing to build out a sales motion, and frankly just making sure that the resources that they've aggregated, all of these GPUs across all of these enterprise latent data centers all over the world, are being used for production, dollar denominated workloads that are coming from a bunch of different customers. So I think those guys did a phenomenal job, and moment of crisis is super normal. As you know, in crypto, is the most adversarial space there can be. And so, yeah,
I think everyone is in crisis right now. It's just a moment of when you realize it, oh fuck, we're actually fucked, right? And you guys have been in the trenches with so many projects, Solana, when it was at $8, you all still were just backing it, right? I feel that is the biggest value add a VC can give, other than of course a term sheet and money, right? Just keep backing them, right?